I'm going to start by welcoming, if I could please have your attention. I'd like to welcome everyone here today. We are delighted to see so many here this afternoon, and we are looking forward to hearing from you. My name is Timothy Wesco. I am state representative from Northern Indiana, St. Joseph and Elkhart counties. I am the chair of the House Elections and Apportionment Committee. I would like to ask each of the members present, both from the Senate Elections Committee as well as from the House Elections Committee, to introduce themselves at this time, starting with my co-chair, Senator Ford.
Good to see so many folks here today. I look forward to hearing some great comments. My name is John Ford, State Senator, District 38 from the Terre Haute area, and I'm chairman of the Senate Election Committee. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Ron Grooms, State Senate District 46, Clark and Floyd counties, Indiana, Jeffersonville, Clarksville, New Albany area. Thank you for coming out today. I look forward to hearing your comments, questions, and testimony. Thank you.
Eric Cook of Bedford. I serve Senate District 44, which is all or parts of Lawrence, Monroe, Jackson, Brown, and Bartholomew counties, and I appreciate everyone's participation today.
Senator Aaron Houchin, District 47, all of Washington, Orange, Harrison, Crawford, Perry, and the eastern half of Du Bois County in southern Indiana. Thanks for being here today.
I'm Matt Pierce, State Representative for District 61, which is most of the city of Bloomington. And I'd like to say that while it's always valuable for legislators to hear public testimony, these hearings would be more valuable to the public if they were held after the new legislative and congressional districts are formally proposed.
Representative Pierce, if we could just go through the introductions, and then I will recognize you to speak.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Pryor.
State Representative Cherish Pryor, District 94, the northwest side of Indianapolis.
Good afternoon. I'm State Representative Sue Arrington, District 34, which is Muncie.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Fadi Kadura, and I represent Senate District 30, the north side of Indy, and the south side of Hamilton County, and I welcome everyone to the People's House.
Hello, Tanya Paff, representative from Terre Haute on the west side of the state, and thank you all for coming.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. State Senator J.D. Ford, representing District 29, which covers Hamilton, Boone, and Marion counties. Thank you to all the folks that are here today to lift up your voice. The State House is your house.
Alan Morrison, House District 42, parts of Vigo, Clay, Park, Warren, Fountain counties in Vermilion.
Ed Soliday, District 4 of Valparaiso.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Tim O'Brien, State Representative, House District 78, representing portions of Vanderburgh and Warwick County.
Welcome, everybody. I'm State Representative Bob Cherry. I represent District 53, which is most of Hancock County and the southern part of Madison County.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Craig Snow. I'm a representative from District 18, representing Wabash, Kosciuszko, and parts of Miami and Grant County.
Good afternoon. Senator Greg Walker, representing parts of Bartholomew and Johnson counties.
Afternoon. My name is Mike Speedy. I serve House District 90, which is southeast Marion County.
Good afternoon. My name is Senator John Crane. I represent District 24, which is most of Hendricks, most of Putnam counties, and appreciate the opportunity to hear more continued testimony after the meetings we've held across the state last week.
I think that is all the members that are on the committees. Of course, we do have other members who are represented here this morning, and we're glad to have you. I see various ones, Representative Porter, Representative Andrade, Representative Pack, and are there any others here? Yes, Representative. So welcome. We're glad to have each of you here. This is the redistricting process that occurs once every 10 years. So it is a relatively rare occasion here at the Indiana General Assembly. And as I'm sure many of you are aware, the Indiana General Assembly is responsible for drawing the congressional districts and the Indiana House and Senate districts upon the release of the decennial census data, which, if it will be according to schedule, will be tomorrow, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. The bills will start in the House Bill 1581 and House Bill 1582. They are currently listed as vehicle bills on the IGA website. We plan to reconvene in mid-September and to go through the normal legislative process to have public hearings in both the House and the Senate to give the public opportunity to give direct input upon the proposed maps, which will be available at that time, as well as further discussion amongst legislators. Also, I want everyone to know that members of the public will have the opportunity to draw and submit their own maps using an online portal mapping software at Ivy Tech campuses statewide. We anticipate this to be available in the next week or two. I do want to establish just a few brief rules for our meeting today. The purpose is for us to hear from Hoosiers across the state. This is our 9th meeting here in the 9th Congressional District, right? And I want to just invite all of those who would like to speak today. We have paper forms for you to fill out and that you can submit those, and then you will be recognized for speaking. We ask that you limit your comments to redistricting specifically, the principles of redistricting, as well as any specific preferences you might have for new district lines. Members of the public giving testimony are asked to limit their comments to 5 minutes or less. I say less because we have a large crowd here today, so we might need to keep that concise and keep moving through that. The meeting will conclude after 2 hours, which is about 3 o'clock. Questions from the committee members are in order if you want clarification from anyone testifying. However, as a committee, we are not answering questions directly addressed to us this afternoon. However, if members in their closing comments want to address questions, they're welcome to do that. Streaming of this meeting is available at iga.in.gov/redistricting. I would like to recognize Representative Pierce for opening comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, as I was saying, it's because today we have no census data nor proposed maps on which the public could comment. These hearings would be more valuable if they were held after we had that stuff. It's important to know the redistricting process is actually 2 separate tracks operating in parallel. One is a public relations track that is visible to the public in hearings like this one. It's designed to create the illusion of transparency. Rhetoric about communities of interest, respecting geopolitical boundaries, and reaching out to the minority party will be plentiful. Fairness will be stressed. The other track happens behind closed doors beyond the view of the public. There, massive amounts of political and demographic data are entered into a computer that runs hundreds, if not thousands, of redistricting scenarios to find just the right ones that will maximize the number of legislative and congressional seats for the majority party. This powerful combination of big data and computer power results in lopsided majorities for the party controlling the redistricting process that do not reflect the will of the voters. So while today we will get to hear hopes and aspirations for new district maps, the public won't really have much impact on the outcome unless the closed-door redistricting track is forced into the open sunshine of public view. Let's have more hearings after the proposed maps are revealed so the public can tell us what they think of the maps produced by the behind closed doors process. Thank you.
I have asked our legislative services attorneys staff to go through those who have signed up and to read their names. We're going to read the person testifying and then 2 more names because we realize some people up in the balcony may have signed up and we want to give everybody as much time as possible to come forward. We're going to alternate between this mic and that mic. So if if one person is speaking and you're immediately up deck, you can feel free to come and stand behind the other mic and prepare to give your testimony so that way we can toggle back and forth relatively quickly and give as many people the opportunity to speak this afternoon as possible. Who do we have up first?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll do my best to pronounce these names correctly. First up is Luberta Jenkins. On deck, Ami Gandhi and Elliot Berger. Luberta Jenkins first.
Is Roberta here? Okay, could we go to the next person's name?
Okay.
Give her time to come down.
Ami Gandhi, please. Followed by Elliot Berger.
Also up there? All right. And the third?
Clara Glaspie.
All right, third. All right. We have someone here, and then the two folks that are up there will begin to make their way down and get set up here at this mic. Oh, I thought we did. Welcome. If you could restate your name and any organization you represent.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Ami Gandhi. I'm a resident of Bloomington, Indiana. Sorry, I'm catching my breath, came from way back there. I was born and raised in Fort Wayne, Indiana, lived in Chicago, and I work for a Chicago civil rights organization, a nonpartisan organization called Chicago Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights. And I, again, live in Bloomington, was really excited to move back to my home state of Indiana in recent times to be closer to family, but the conditions that I see here are very concerning to me. I am senior counsel for voting rights and civic empowerment at Chicago Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization dedicated to advancing racial equity. As civil rights lawyers who unfortunately had to resort to suing the state of Indiana before, we are here to remind anyone who may want to listen that it is not acceptable to flout the Federal Voting Rights Act and other civil rights protections that our communities of color, Black communities and other communities of color here in Indiana deserve. Redistricting plans must be drawn in a manner that allows Indiana residents, including people of all racial backgrounds, to elect candidates of our choice who represent and are held accountable to the interests of our communities. Lawmakers need to get the maps right the first time around and not risk a lawsuit through problematic map drawing that violates our basic civil rights of Hoosier voters. Right now, signs point toward an unfair redistricting process in Indiana that may result in protected communities of interest and majority-minority communities being carved up or otherwise silenced or their votes being diluted. These hearings, for example, as we heard a couple minutes ago, are taking place before the census data is released on August 12th, tomorrow, and before the public has any access to maps. That's like asking someone to solve a jigsaw puzzle and using the wrong pieces. It's not transparent, and it doesn't allow for the public to give true input or for the map drawers to give meaningful consideration to that input that they can take into account. We should be holding hearings after the congressional and legislative maps are released, after the draft maps are released, ideally before they're finalized and enacted. And the hearings should be all throughout Indiana, taking into account populated areas and not just locations that would favor a more political-friendly turnout. Throughout the hearings, we've been seeing standing room only attendance. That's why I'm catching my breath a little bit from being back there. I'm really grateful to be here. We've seen people of different political ideologies and racial backgrounds who are asking for transparency, fairness, and a nonpartisan redistricting process, a process that people can trust in Indiana. And lawmakers must provide detailed information on the data that's being used, including census, political, and demographic data. We must be able to assess the reliability of the data and understand what estimation techniques were used, because there's clearly work going on right now, even before the census data has been released. We Hoosiers deserve a chance to question this legislature about the specific proposed maps, not just to make general comments that will unfortunately probably get swiftly ignored. We demand it, and so does the law. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have Clara Glaspie next.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Clara Glaspie, and I'm testifying today as a member of the Indiana Citizens Redistricting Committee. I want to thank you for having public hearings to take public input on redistricting. It's extremely important that you take the time to listen to what Hoosiers think and about the important issue, and appreciate the opportunity to share my views with you. The IRC is a demonstration project sponsored by the All-in-One for Democracy Coalition. We are a group of 9 Hoosiers. 3 of us are Democrats, 3 of us are Republicans, and 3 don't affiliate with either party. I'm the Republican representative for the Indianapolis area on the commission. To give you a brief history about myself, I'm a former state employee. I work for FSSA. I work for Indiana State Housing Board. I work for the Indiana State Board of Health. I also work for the City of Indianapolis. I've been on the Urban League Board, Community Centers of Indianapolis, INHP's board, and I was also chairperson for the Indianapolis Housing Agency for 10 years. And right now, I currently am on the Pike Township Resident Association Board. The purpose of the IRC is to demonstrate how redistricting would work under the frame of Citizens Redistricting Committee. Earlier this year, over the course of about 6 weeks, we had a series of virtual public meetings that we attended by more than 900 people. We heard hours of public testimony compiled that the information into a report that we sent to the legislature early this summer. I hope that you have read our report. If not, I have copies here to share. It can be found in the Coalition's website. It contains several recommendations gleaned from public testimony we heard. Those recommendations are: draw districts that encourage competitive elections. The most common complaint we heard from the public is that too many districts in Indiana at both the congressional and state legislature are not competitive. This leaves many people feeling as their voice isn't heard in the process. Keep communities of interest together. Don't combine classing communities of interest in the same district. We heard from many people, particularly those in urban areas, that their communities are divided into multiple districts. This is confusing for voters and can make it difficult for communities to get the representation that they need. Constituents in these districts often have very different needs and concerns, making it difficult for their legislator to fully represent everyone. Divide cities and counties into as few districts as possible. From Fort Wayne to Greencastle, we heard numerous examples of cities and counties divided into far more districts than their population would justify, creating confusion and often reducing the political influence of the community. Create a transparent process that gives the public real opportunities to participate in the creation of new districts. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have Elliot Berger now, and on deck, Luberta Jenkins, Rachel Stutzman, Marilyn Moran Townsend.
Welcome. Good afternoon. You don't want to hear what I have to say, huh? Let's try that again. I'm Elliot Berger. I'm a resident of Marion County. I've lived in Indiana since 1977. I'm testifying here as an independent citizen. In fact, I have no written notes. I did not prepare a speech. The reason that I'm here is that I've been following what's been going on in our state for many years and across the country, and I'm very concerned about the sorts of issues that Matt Pierce and the prior 2 speakers have already discussed. So I don't need to go into all those details. What I need to tell you is that I passionately feel that we need to have districts that represent our people. I haven't heard the G word yet, gerrymandering. I think we need to be done with gerrymandering in this state. We need... And what I wasn't as familiar with was what Matt spoke about, which was the 2-track process. One that's open to the public and seems transparent and appropriate, and then the hidden one that actually does the work that we don't hear about. And I think we need to do away with that. So that's what I'm standing here for today. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Marilyn Moran Townsend. I'm also, like Clara, a Republican member of the Indiana Citizens Redistricting Commission. My daily prayers include a request for wise governance from our leaders. And while I believe that wisdom comes from the Almighty, I also believe that it comes through the people. And that is why I am so grateful for these hearings today. And so I say to Chairman Wesco and to Chairman Ford, thank you for holding these statewide hearings. And I hope that you're able to learn from them about what the public is seeking in the upcoming redistricting process. As a Republican member of the Indiana Citizens Redistricting Commission, I heard similar comments in the multitude of hearings that we held across the state earlier this year. I support and had an opportunity to contribute to the report of the Citizens Redistricting Commission. And the Commission's call for fair maps resonates with me for 3 reasons. First of all, as a Republican and the former chair of the Indiana Chamber, you would think that having my party be the supermajority would be to my liking. Well, not exactly, because there have been numerous instances where we have wanted to get something done that we thought was important in the state for business, and yet we have confronted a legislator who did not feel that they needed to be engaged in that issue because they were from a safe district and did not need to respond to the voters. Second, I'm the co-founder of AVOW, Advancing Voices of Women. And in fact, I was unable to attend the Fort Wayne hearing this past weekend because I was chairing the AVOW Women's Campaign Institute, where we conducted 27 hours of training for candidates, campaign managers, and for those seeking appointments to public boards and commissions from both parties. A core principle of AVOW is that we teach women to collaborate across the aisle to get good things done. And yet, in recent years, we have been really discouraged as our graduates have returned to us and said that they simply were unable to fulfill that because the majority party did not feel the need to collaborate with the minority party in order to be reelected. Now, none of this is good for democracy, and I know that we Republicans really care about democracy. You may think that's funny, but I don't. I really believe it. I've been involved also, thirdly, in public life long enough to remember the time that the Democrats were in the majority party, and they will be again at some point in the future. And so we understand from our voters that they believe that unfair maps by either party leads to less representative government, it leads to more abuses in government, it leads to more extreme government, and it leads to less responsive government. It is all bad for democracy. It is all bad for democracy, and it is the opposite of election integrity. The Indiana Citizens Redistricting Commission will be holding the map drawing contest across the state as soon as that census data is available. And we're going to submit the winning maps to your committees for your consideration. I strongly urge you to seriously consider the citizen-drawn maps as you are conducting your map drawing process. And you can do so much to accomplish and overcome the fear and distrust of government by making the map drawing process transparent. And finally, I'm heartened to hear that you're expecting to take public feedback during the process, and I strongly encourage you to do that so that you hear from the citizens as you have drawn maps and before you submit them to Governor Holcomb. It is the only way that we can truly draw fair maps, and that is with public input. It is that wisdom through the people to our wise government leaders. And so I urge you to do that. I am happy to answer any questions that you have now or later, and I'm also happy to be available to work with you on this important process. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is Julia Vaughn. Julia Vaughn on deck, Rachel Stutzman, and Katie Blair.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, Chairman Wesco. Thank you, Chairman Ford and members of the Elections Committee. I'm Julia Vaughn, the Executive Director of Common Cause Indiana and a co-founder of the All In for Democracy Coalition. I'm speaking for the coalition today, but you've already heard our message from many of the people who testified at the hearings last week. You've also heard today from some of the members of the Indiana Citizens Redistricting Commission, the model redistricting commission our coalition formed to demonstrate how redistricting should be done, transparently and openly with a variety of options for public participation by a multi-partisan group of people with no direct interest in the outcome. These folks have been incredibly dedicated to this issue. I hope you will take their testimony to heart. I spent Friday and Saturday of last week traveling around the state to attend your legislative hearings held in the northern part of Indiana. And since I spent hours in the car, I had lots of time to think about what you heard from the public last week. Several things stand out to me. First, it's really gratifying to see that their work our coalition has been doing for 6 years take hold. 10 years ago, there was simply not as much public engagement on this issue, likely because people didn't really understand how gerrymandering impacts them as voters. Senator Cook, you were the chairman of the House Elections Committee back in 2011, and I believe the only person on either elections committee today who was closely involved in the map drawing 10 years ago. I hope that you were impressed, like I was, with the level of knowledge about the intricacies of redistricting that the public displayed last week. It seems to me that you are seeing more citizens involved today because they felt the impact of the 2011 gerrymandering by the Red Map Project on their communities and on their daily lives. Redistricting really matters. And Hoosiers, we understand that now. 10 years ago, not so much. But there's no going back to those days when you could draw maps with little attention and public scrutiny. I was also struck by the level of emotion I heard from so many people when they testified about the need for a different kind of redistricting this year. I recall one woman in Goshen. The metaphor that she used was that democracy is hanging by a thread, and its fate, at least here in Indiana, rests in your hands. That's an incredibly heavy burden to carry, and I hope you will take the public's concerns seriously. Since the election season started last year, our country has endured varied and sustained attacks on its most important and fundamental democratic function, the election process. And it's not overly dramatic to say that we fear for the future. People can see, they can feel their democracy slipping away, and they are looking for you to save it. Please don't disappoint them. Several of the legislative leaders and Governor Holcomb have promised that the new districts will fulfill all legal and constitutional requirements, which frankly isn't very reassuring. The law and the Constitution do not require you to be fair. They do not require you to be equitable. They do not require you to be transparent and to provide opportunities for the public to participate. So we are calling on you to go beyond what the law requires. We are asking you to follow a higher law and conduct redistricting with a focus on the greater good, because Indiana's future and the future of self-governance is at stake. Representative Wesco, at the Fort Wayne hearing, you responded to concerns about the hiring of a Washington, D.C.-based political consultant by saying this is necessary because federal law regarding the Voting Rights Act and redistricting is complicated, and you need this attorney's help to avoid racial gerrymandering lawsuits. Now, the problem isn't that you've hired a consultant. The problem is the consultant and law firm that you've hired. Jason Torchinsky and his firm are not known for their work to uphold and strengthen voting rights for voters of color, but instead for working to undermine them. They have been sued by civil rights organizations in North Carolina for filing false and malicious voting fraud claims, and also by the NAACP in Louisiana for their work to block the state's efforts to settle a lawsuit over racially biased judicial elections. They have also worked for Fair Lines America, an organization that works against citizen-led efforts to establish independent redistricting commissions. Putting Jason Torchinsky in charge of ensuring that Indiana follows the Voting Rights Act is like appointing a person who's been convicted of arson as the fire marshal. The only way to prove
If you could please bring your comments to a close.
our concerns unfounded is to release the contract with this consultant, because it appears his work is more political than legal in nature. Our concerns won't be eased until we understand exactly what you have hired him to do. I do have two very specific recommendations regarding the upcoming process that I want to mention. First, please hear the call that so many have made for additional public hearings around the state once draft maps have been produced and enough time for citizens to analyze your proposals and provide feedback. The timeline that has been hinted at, the final 2 weeks in September, simply doesn't provide the public enough time. If you won't consider extending the redistricting process into the month of October, which we strongly urge you to do, then release your maps at least a week, preferably 2 weeks, before the House Election Committee convenes on September 20th.
Could you please bring your comments to a close? We're about 7 minutes.
Sorry, you're going to get census data tomorrow. If you could set a timeline where you release proposed maps on September 7th, that would give us more time. Second, I would encourage you to protect communities of interest by not sticking to the same population deviation standard for state legislative maps as you do for congressional maps. While federal law requires you to keep populations as equal as possible for congressional districts, that standard is not in place for state legislative districts. So allowing the population, the average population, to vary between state legislative districts would be a very practical way to prevent splitting communities of interest. I apologize for going over my time, but again, I had a lot of time to reflect on what I heard from the public this weekend. We simply ask that you listen to us and give us a fair process, give us fair maps. Thank you.
Got Rachel Stutzman next. Rachel Stutzman, and then on deck, Katie Blair and Kathy Lyons.
Before you begin your testimony, we've compiled those who have signed up, and we have 43 people signed up to testify. And so I'm just wanting to urge you to move through your comments. That would be about 2 minutes each to conclude by 3 o'clock. So I'm going to try to give leniency, but if you can just move through your comments as quickly as possible. If someone's already made your points and you wish to pass, you're welcome to do that as well. Welcome.
Thank you. I will not be so polished. I am a citizen, And it is my understanding that the incredible economy of the United States came from competition. And in this assembly, I think one of the most heinous signs of lack of competition that I've seen is seeing our black representatives booed for testimony to their experience. Really embarrassing. So anyway, then I read about this consultant who's been hired, and I become downright disgusted, and I want to march down here and say, for Pete's sake, get your act together. Do this the right way. Be fair.
Okay, Katie Blair next.
Representative Pryor.
I did not get the lady's name that testified, and I did want to thank
Rachel
her for her
Stutzman,
comments.
the previous lady.
Rachel Stutzman?
Yes.
Thank you.
So Katie Blair, then Kathy Lyons, and then Mac Fehrenbacher.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Katie Blair, and I'm the Director of Advocacy and Public Policy at the ACLU of Indiana. As a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization dedicated to preserving and strengthening the civil liberties afforded to every Hoosier, the ACLU of Indiana works to protect and expand the freedom of to vote through advocacy, education, and litigation. The right to vote is a critical cornerstone of our democracy, and fair redistricting is fundamental to ensuring that every vote counts. Once in a decade, the legislature redraws districts based on data gathered in the census. Those new district lines determine our political voice, shaping our lives and our communities for the next decade. When redistricting is conducted properly, district lines are redrawn to reflect population changes and racial diversity. Unfortunately, lawmakers throughout history, and regardless of political party, have used gerrymandering to attack the right to vote and dilute the voting power of Black and Brown communities. They have used their power to manipulate voting district lines in ways that weaken the voting power of what would otherwise be an influential voting bloc. In contrast, fair and equitable district maps would provide all Hoosiers an equal opportunity to elect officials based on community interest. The more Hoosiers participating in the electoral process, the more our state and country flourish as a democracy. Voting isn't just about electing candidates. It's not. It's about a sense of dignity and the ability to practice a person's constitutional right to participate in our political process. It's about influencing policies and holding federal, state, and local governments accountable. It's about knowing your vote is valued. After hearing from Hoosiers across the state, it's clear that no matter who we are or where we come from, when it comes to having a say over who represents us, most of us want similar things. We want a transparent process we can trust, and a result that keeps communities whole and ensure voters have an equal voice. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Kathy Lyons. On deck, Mark Fehrenbacher and Josh Lowry.
Hi, my name is Kathy Lyons. I have lived in Indiana my entire life. This will actually be the 5th time that I have been a voter where they have actually done redistricting. The first time I thought, this is really strange. It was 1980. And I'm going, why in the world did they put this little finger in the district? Okay. Now, I haven't really been into a lot of the redistricting. I've been more into disability rights. Now that I'm retired, I live in Indianapolis, by the way, since I retired, I started looking at some of this, and I'm going, okay, 6.6 million people. That means approximately 66,000 or 132,000 in each congressional district. Well, I look at the map, and the congressional district shouldn't be that difficult. A little bit more so when you look at the cities, because to me it's important that Kokomo be one district. and Muncie and Anderson. It's like, why in the world, if we have a smaller town, are we chopping the hell out of it? Makes no sense to me. So over the decades, every 10 years, I kind of look at this redistricting stuff, and it's like, what in the heck are they doing? Every time it's done, it makes less sense. And every time we have a general election, by the way, I've never missed a general election in all my life. First time was way back in the 60s. I'm that old, yes. But it seems like people are saying, why should I even bother voting? My vote doesn't matter. And of course, to me, it's like, I have always felt my vote mattered. My mother was one of these judges, hear ye, back in the 50s. You know, my dad used to drive people to the polls who couldn't get there to vote. So to me, I have always looked at it as a responsibility. It breaks my heart how people, because of the districting, say, my vote doesn't matter, and they don't really care anyway. I look at this as Indiana's chance to start to do the right thing and reverse what I started seeing way back in 1980 when I lived in Lafayette. No excuse. You're welcome.
Thank you. There is Mark Fehrenbacher next, Josh Lowry, and Jeffrey Maurer on deck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Mark Fehrenbacher from Fort Branch down in Gibson County. And this will probably be the only person that will say this from this crowd, but I generally support how the General Assembly does the redistricting, generally. But I do have some observations and a question or two. I understand, it's a constitutional requirement every 10 years. And one of your requirements is the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which one of those requirements is that your districts have to be within 10% of each other as far as population-wise. That's one of your guidance. Other state-based requirements, and there's like 4 of them. One is a contiguity, compactness, a community of interest, and state legislative district lines be drawn to account for political boundaries, such as limits of counties, cities, and towns. Now, considering what the lady brought up about gerrymandering, I've seen over the years where it seemed like your district lines sort of like cross the street here to grab this population, then cross the street again. I think as far as district line drawing, I think that the smallest subdivision that you should, or smallest political subdivision that you should consider is township boundaries. I don't think you need to cross the street or whatever to, gather whatever population you want. But I think honor the smallest political subdivision. And then a question that I have is the, and I'm gathered some notes from Ballotpedia, just for some general information. It says the Indiana Constitution mandates that state legislative districts be contiguous. There are no such requirements for congressional district lines. And I was just wondering why or why not, even though it's not required, why not consider that requirement for congressional maps. And then I think one of the people out here was mentioning a few times that the party in power, when they draw these lines, draw these districts, to keep that party in power, and therefore these districts aren't competitive. Well, I'm looking at the margins from the 2016 election in the 9 congressional districts. Each of the 9 winners, 2 of them Democrat, the rest of them Republican, all of them had at least a 20% win margin, with the exception of Mr. Hollingsworth in the 9th district. had a 13% win margin. Mr. Pisklowski, I don't know if I pronounced his name right, had a 63% win margin, and Mr. Carson had a 24% win margin. So, they say these maps, you aren't competitive or whatever. I think you just need better candidates if you want to be competitive. So, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony.
Josh Lowry, Jeffrey Maurer, and Jack Waninger on deck.
Hello, my name is Josh Lowry. I'm an attorney from Westfield. I actually used to work for the Attorney General's office, and I actually had the honor of defending some of the General Assembly's statutes and also some of the General Assembly members themselves. But I kind of find myself on the other side right now. I live up in Westfield, and for the last 10 years, I don't feel like my vote has mattered. I live in House District 24, which looks like a pixelated mushroom. And there can be no other purpose for that drawing other than to gerrymander it. But what I want to talk about today is not just how the gerrymandering and the way that these maps are drawn affects who wins, but how it affects the person who wins and how they act. Leading up to the 2020 election, my niece came to me and heard that I was going to vote Democrat. And she said, "How can you vote Democrat? I thought you were a Christian." Now I want you to think about that. What she has heard, she's 11, what she has heard made her believe that your party determined your religion or vice versa. Now it's not hard to figure out where she would have got that from. If you turn on the TV, if you listen to the radio, everything's so tribal. Everything is so partisan. It's all about vilifying the other side. And there's not even talk of policies anymore. But why is that? See, I personally don't believe that it's because of these media people that they're driving people to be more tribal. I think it's the reverse. If they provide that supply, that has to be coming from some demand somehow. I believe it's the result of political process, and specifically gerrymandering. By gerrymandering these races, the candidate's only real goal is to win their primary. So they speak only to primary voters by vilifying the other side. They try to win voters by showing that they also hate the voters that they hate. And why not? Because to win a race, they don't need the votes of the other party or of the independents. Now, I think that we would all agree that this division is not good for our country, this tribalism, this vilifying of each other. And what hits most home to me as a foster parent of 5 kids is it's teaching our kids to be that way. For most of us, there's not a lot we can do about it. We can talk about it online, we can show up to things like this, we can protest. But I want to speak to the legislators, because for all of you, there is something you can do about it. When you draw these maps, the more gerrymandered they are, the more split we are going to be as a people. If we can draw them, look, we all know, no matter how you draw them, I think we could safely assume who's going to be in the majority the next time. But by drawing these in a fair way that everyone feels like they're involved, now that person that's running or that person that wins can't just go out and vilify everyone else. They may need the votes, they may need the help, they may need the other politicians from other party or independents. And so I just want to ask that when you redraw these maps, you redraw them so that people have to, the politicians specifically, are responsible to their constituents and not just their primary voters. Thank you.
Got Jeffrey Maurer, Jack Weniger, Sally Sloan on deck.
Ready?
Go ahead.
95 seconds. Here we go. Benjamin Franklin famously said, "Democracy is 2 wolves and a sheep voting on what to have for lunch." But here in Indiana, with our gerrymandered electoral maps and our corrupt redistricting process, we have 1 wolf voting on how to eat 2 sheep. That's our problem. That isn't fair, it isn't American, and Hoosiers deserve better. My name is Jeff Moorer, and I'm here representing the Libertarian Party of Indiana and our redistricting proposal. We created a set of fair principles and processes for redistricting congressional and Indiana legislature districts, including 4 main points. Number 1, drawing maps through an independent and nonpartisan commission. Number 2, keeping communities whole. Do not divide counties or school districts. Number 3, using communities with fixed boundaries that can't easily be manipulated by partisan interests. And number 4, by accepting a greater variation in district population to keep community voices whole. You can review the Libertarian maps online, including our processes and principles and all the details behind it, at rethinkredistricting.com. I'm asking you, members of the Indiana General Assembly, and here's a big one, I'm asking you, members of the Indiana General Assembly, to recuse yourselves from redistricting to avoid a clear, ethical conflict of interest. Instead, let's work together to uphold our greatest American values. Let's stop politicians from choosing their voters, and instead let Hoosiers choose their representatives. Thank you.
Jack Waniger, Sally Sloan on deck, and Barbara Tully on deck.
Welcome. Hello, my name is Jack Waninger. I grew up in Indianapolis. I was born in Indianapolis. I grew up in Hamilton and Madison counties, which placed me in the 5th Congressional District for the U.S. House of Representatives in Indiana. Like many other Hoosiers my age, I was very excited to vote for the first time last year. And as you know, the 5th District is very close and competitive. It was very exciting as a voter to be able to participate in an electoral contest that was so very close and competitive. However, not everyone in the state gets to have the luxury of living in a competitive district like I did. Urban cities like Bloomington, South Bend, and Fort Wayne are stuck in otherwise deep red districts that are heavily outweighed by the voter preferences of those respective cities. I am a Democrat, but it would be delusional for me to ask you to draw the district maps to be evenly split for both parties. In a state like Indiana, unless you draw a map that looks like a bowl of spilled spaghetti noodles, at least half of the congressional districts will probably end up leaning Republican. All I'm hoping is that you don't consider partisan data when you draw these maps. While racial gerrymandering is considered illegal, partisan gerrymandering isn't. That doesn't make it any less wrong. Our electoral districts should balance proportionality, community compactness, and protection of minority representation. Indiana's state senate is composed of 39 Republicans and 11 Democrats. I'm not a mathematician, nor am I the smartest person in the world, but I did learn division in elementary school. 78% of our members of our state's upper legislature are Republicans. I think there are very few legislatures in the world that have that many members from a single party. North Korea, maybe, China, I don't know. However, there is an important difference because in North Korea and China, there's only one legal political party. In the United States, there are several. I bet 100% of the people who go to the sham elections in China are probably voting for the Communist Party. I don't think 78% of people in Indiana are voting for the Republican Party. Now, I do know, and I know Republicans do dislike being compared to communists, and I do not blame you. And I'm giving you a way to distance yourself from this connection here. So, unlike communist bureaucrats, our elected representatives are responsible to the constituents of their state, the people, and not to party bosses. And the people of Indiana, they want fair representation in both our state and federal legislatures. I don't think that is too much to ask for. All that being said, I hope that the state legislature will draw maps in the next few months that are at least sensible. If you, our elected state legislators, take this opportunity to end partisan gerrymandering in Indiana, this legislature would probably start to look a little more like the state it's supposed to represent. I know it's wishful thinking asking you all to draw maps that might harm your own chances of re-election, but think about it. If your district suddenly became a little more competitive, you'd probably get more media attention and maybe fundraise a little bit more. And if there's two things in the world that politicians like the most, it's attention and money. So redistricting reform can truly be a bipartisan, unifying win-win for everyone here. So I thank you all for listening, coming out today. God bless the state of Indiana. Thank you.
Sally Sloan. Then on deck, Barbara Tully. And on deck, Jay Yeager. Jay Yeager.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairman Wesco and Chairman Ford and committee, not only for hearing the citizens of Indiana, but also for listening as you move forward with redistricting. I am Sally Sloan. I live in Indianapolis, and I'm here today to speak for myself as well as on behalf of AFT Indiana, the American Federation of Teachers. As you might expect, my comments also reflect my personal opinions as a Hoosier voter and taxpayer, as well as that as the organization that I represent. Redistricting affects our public schools in so many ways. And while AFT advocates for public education, you understand, as well as all school stakeholders do, that elections and voter turnout determines what happens in the legislature. And what happens in the legislature determines what happens within the walls of our K-12 schools. We want the new maps to reflect fairness to all. Maps should be drawn so that voters determine who will represent them, who will represent us, and not vice versa. Please be transparent. We believe that the best way to achieve fairness and transparency is by using an independent, nonpartisan commission. Some may think that we're too far along in this process to choose an independent commission, but I think we all understand that it's never too late to do the right thing. Thank you for your time, your consideration, and your work.
Thank you.
Next, Barbara Tully. On deck, Jay Yeager and Greg Comer.
Thank you to the public. Thank you to Senator Ford and to Chairman Wesco for the hearings over the last several days, seeking input from Indiana voters. I am Barbara Tully, the president of Indiana Vote by Mail. I'm speaking for Indiana Vote by Mail today, but on a personal level, I am represented by Kyle Walker, State Senate District 31, Chris Jeter, State House District 88, and by Victoria Sparks, Congressional District 5. I've been in Indiana for 34 years, 19 of them in Indianapolis, and I can say that I vote in every single election, but in my 19 years in Indianapolis, I have never felt represented. Before Senator Kyle Walker and Chris Jeter, I was represented by Representative Bosma and Senator Merritt, and they never worked for my vote in my district, ever. Never heard from them. I had even placed calls to them over the years and never got a call back. And that's simply unacceptable in a politician. And as nice as Representative Jeter and Senator Walker are, I don't think they're going to have to work very hard for my vote either in the shapes of my current district. So I would like to see that rectified. Excuse me. In fact, I spoke with Kyle Walker about the redistricting process, and he didn't think redistricting could ever be done on a nonpartisan basis. I respectfully disagreed with him. But if this is a fundamental belief for the caucus of the party in power, then you've surrendered before even putting in an effort. We know that voter turnout has been poor for years in Indiana, 53% on average for general elections, 24% on average for primaries, according to the Secretary of State's own website. According to the United States Election Project, Indiana regularly ranks between 41st and 47th place in voter turnout, although we know in 2014 we scraped the bottom of the barrel and we were dead last. From a 2011 news story in Rolling Stone, quote, Republicans have long tried to drive Democratic voters away from the polls. I don't want everybody to vote, an influential conservative activist Paul Weyrich told a gathering of evangelical leaders in 1980. As a matter of fact, our leverage in the elections quite candidly goes up as the voting populace goes down. To be clear, as others have said, gerrymandering is wrong no matter what party is engaging in it. Citizens with good intent can and should always challenge unfair districting. To further quote from a July 28, 2021 op-ed by Representative Lee Hamilton, a respected statesman here from Indiana, quote, the cornerstone of representative democracy, the base on which everything rests, is the people's right to cast an informed vote to choose our leaders. There's no argument about this. It's just a basic right, which means that the more Americans we hear from in the voting booth, the fairer, the more and more representative the results. So in my book, getting creative about redistricting, the ability to cast a ballot is pretty much an admission that you can't win in the marketplace of ideas, end quote. During the hearings held on August 6th and 7th, the cynicism dripping from many of the comments was sad. Public comments appeared not to have included testimony from citizens who said, geez, gerrymandering's great, let's do more of that. Republican citizens, Democratic citizens, independents, libertarians, all citizens were saying the same thing. Make this process fair, transparent, and open. Let us comment on maps once drawn by holding more public hearings. Show us the data and let us know the consultants used and show us their contracts. We at Indiana Vote by Mail echoes those comments. An independent study commissioned by Women for Change Indiana was written by Dr. Christopher Warshall, a tenured professor of political science at George Washington University with a PhD in political science and a JD from Stanford. Dr. Warshall has testified as an expert for voters and challenges to partisan gerrymanders in Pennsylvania and Michigan. To summarize his findings in 5 highlights, the study found that Indiana's maps are unfair. In fact, they are more biased toward one party than 95% of all U.S. districting plans for which data is available over the last 50 years. Indiana's maps blunt the impact of Democratic votes by packing many Democratic voters into a few heavily Democratic districts. As a result, Indiana Democrats are underrepresented in the General Assembly and in Congress. One party is effectively shut out of the legislative district. 3, the Indiana maps bias cannot be explained by where voters live. Number 4, the 2011 maps were more biased than the maps in effect through 2010, and 2 of the 3 2011 maps were much worse than the 2010 maps. That dramatic of a change cannot be caused by voters moving into an area. Highly bias-led maps come most often from one party in control of map drawing. It is performative to say that Indiana legislators want everyone to vote, then don't do anything to ensure that it happens. But your actions speak louder than your words, and your words are actively suppressing voter turnout in Indiana. Pardon me?
We're out of time.
Okay, I'll speed it up. The sad thing is that you don't appear to care. Fundamental trust in government is at stake. If you rig the process, citizen participation in our electoral process is discouraged, and you've made that your platform, whether you've stated so or not. Supermajorities mean our House is ruled by special interests and result in no evidence of bipartisanship and compromise being evident in our public policy. This woefully inadequate process for public redistricting hearings ought to make the party in power ashamed. You have allowed the clock to run down to establish an independent redistricting commission. The time and effort have already been put into forming an independent citizens redistricting commission with 3 Republicans, 3 Democrats, 3 independents who are dedicated to the idea of good government. Take their recommendations. Now is the time to prove us wrong and hold hearings through the state after maps are drawn. Fair redistricting means meeting the needs of all voters, not only the voters that voted for you. Thank you.
Jay Yeager, Greg Comer on deck, Jonathan Schwartz on deck.
Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Jay Yeager. I'm from Zionsville. I'm here as a citizen, not on behalf of anyone other than the citizens and voters of the state. I was lead counsel for some voters in Michigan and for the League of Women Voters in Michigan in federal court litigation challenging the gerrymander in Michigan in 2019. I've come to ask you to consider, representatives and senators, 2 concepts. The first is the facts. The previous speakers have gone over the Warshall report. I won't repeat all that. We're at the bottom of the list again. I hate it when Indiana ends up at the bottom of national lists, but we're in the bottom of the list of the most biased maps. Professor Warshall has demonstrated that factually. It's not just an opinion. It's a fact. And we see this. The proof is in the pudding. We see the supermajority. One of the other speakers talked about the difference between the votes and the seats in the legislature. You all know that. We all know that. We all know that's not fair and that that's not right. I don't need to belabor that. I will note that the lack of competitive districts, when you gerrymander and you push competitive districts into safe districts, it hollows out the middle. Where most Hoosiers, I think, live, center, left, center, right. You don't see that in our legislature as much, because the gerrymander has pushed the districts into one party or another. They become safe, the primary is the only thing that matters, and we get partisanship. And apparently this is now about to happen again. We saw in the news yesterday the hiring of a political consultant from Washington, D.C., who is an expert on defending gerrymanders. He's not an expert in drawing fair maps. He's not an expert in determining whether equal votes are weighed equally, just the opposite. Now, I have nothing against Mr. Torchinsky. I've sat across the courtroom from him. He's a fine lawyer. But let's not mistake where he's coming from. He's not coming from a place of fairness. He's ready to defend a partisan gerrymander. This is disturbing. The second concept, quickly, is the law and the Constitution. I think that partisan gerrymandering is illegal in Indiana. Our Constitution, Article 2, Section 1, says all elections shall be free and equal. A gerrymandered map is not an equal election. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court, interpreting precisely the same language, wiped out the Pennsylvania gerrymander 2 years ago. Their Constitution started that language in 1776. Our drafters took that language right from the Pennsylvania Constitution. And that's what the Pennsylvania Supreme Court said. Our Supreme Court hasn't been faced with this precise issue, but way back in the 1890s, they faced a different kind of partisan gerrymander. And they wiped it out based on our Constitution. Our Constitution, which they said requires equality. They talked about, our Supreme Court back in the 1890s talked about the old Massachusetts gerrymander of 1812, how unfair that was. Our Supreme Court talked about the evils of gerrymandering. They liked the colorful language. And concluded that it was quite clear that our founders, and the drafters of our two constitutions, clearly intended to exclude that kind of behavior. And yet we see it now. We saw it from Democrats before. We saw it 10 years ago from Republicans. I hope we don't see it again. I'm afraid we're going to. I'd just like to talk for one moment then about the other court case, which you all Republicans may be thinking about, which is the United States Supreme Court. And you may have the idea that the United States Supreme Court 2 years ago said this is okay. Well, that's not true. The United States Supreme Court said it did not have jurisdiction by a 5-4 vote, but in the same breath, Justice Roberts acknowledged, he had to acknowledge, that gerrymandering is wrong, and he acknowledged the court's prior language that it is incompatible with democratic principles. So if this is going where it looks like it's going, you are going to act in a way that is incompatible with democratic principles, just as Justice Roberts observed. So he sent us back, since there was no jurisdiction, to the states. He said, go back and look at your state constitutions. So we're back to all elections must be free and equal in our state. So I'll close with questions that raises. If you are considering duplicating the 2011 gerrymander, partisan gerrymander, who are you serving? Are you serving the citizens, the voters of Indiana? Does anybody think that? No. You would be serving the interest of a party and the interest of legislators who want to keep safe seats. And that is contrary to the interest of our folks. And what interest, what business does our government have? And I would think conservatives would embrace this. What interest does our government have, legitimate interest, in targeting voters of one party to have their votes diluted, to be crammed into a few districts so that they get super minorities rather than fair representation? That is not a proper function of government. Please release your maps at least a week ahead of time so they can be fully vetted, they can be analyzed by Professor Warshaw and anybody else you want to have analyze them. So we can see how they treat the parties. We can see if the map drawing process has served the voters or incumbent legislators who want to keep their seats. Thank you.
Greg Comer. On deck, Jonathan Schwartz, and also on deck, David Green.
Welcome. Good afternoon. My name is Greg Catter. I'm a citizen. A lot of the points that I had prepared have already been said, so we'll skip those. And I'll just go to the one suggestion that I had that I haven't heard today, and that's the concept of nesting. In Indiana, we have 50 senators, 100 representatives. So step one, draw your 50 Senate districts. Step two, divide them in half. Thanks. Thank you.
Jonathan Schwartz, David Green on deck, and Janani Eswaran on deck as well.
Welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to the members of the committees for holding these hearings and for everyone for coming and listening. My name is Jonathan Schwartz, and I'm proud to have been able to call Indianapolis, specifically Senate District 30 and House District 86, my home for all 22 years of my life. In 2017, I helped found Every Vote Counts, a nonpartisan organization dedicated to improving youth and college student voter turnout and civic engagement. As Every Vote Counts grew from one college chapter to more than 50 chapters with 1,000 students and partners around the country, I've had the unique opportunity over the past 4 years to learn firsthand about what makes young people the least likely to vote of any age group and what can be done to improve turnout and engagement across the board. When I first started this work, I figured that the biggest cause of low voter turnout would be the structural hurdles that students face when voting. In fact, things like having the correct voter ID or navigating unnecessarily strict absentee voting requirements or finding polling places when hours and locations change constantly are all challenges that make it very difficult for young people to vote. But what I found was that these structural difficulties certainly contribute to the problem, but something much deeper is also at stake here. Too often when I talk to people and ask them if they're registered to vote or if there's something I can do to help them make a plan to vote, I'm faced with the response, "Why should I vote? I don't believe it matters." I realized that in addition to all these structural hurdles, a lack of faith in the current version of American democracy makes people question whether they should try to vote at all. At first I was stunned by this, but I've started to realize that it kind of makes sense. College students and young people in my generation haven't ever lived in a democracy that's worked for us. We've grown up knowing only paralyzing polarization, divisive partisanship, and anti-democratic politics. Every election we've known has been marred by corrupt dark money, gerrymandering, voter suppression, even foreign interference. So why is voting going to do anything? How is our vote going to change any of that? I bring this up to motivate two critical points about redistricting. The first is political. As we've heard today, when districts are drawn so that one party is nearly guaranteed to win, the politicians elected and the policies they enact will not reflect the will of voters. When it's a foregone conclusion that one party will win in a district, candidates face no incentive to care what moderates or opposition voters want. When instead of voters choosing representatives, representatives choose voters, the democratic foundations of our government collapse. The second point is democratic. When districts are drawn so as to purposefully deprive voters of one party of any political power, we're telling those voters that their voice doesn't matter. When we make it harder for certain groups of people to cast their votes, we're telling them that they're not welcome in our democracy. And when we do these things, we're saying to all Americans, critically, regardless of party, that power no longer rests with we the people, but with we the politicians. Make no mistake, these messages are powerful, and they are being heard loud and clear by the next generation of Hoosiers and Americans. If Hoosiers' faith in our government is to be restored, if we're to inspire the next generation of leaders to believe that our democratic project can in fact work, Indiana cannot continue to have among the lowest voter turnout and most politically rigged districts in the country. In enacting independent, fair redistricting and repairing Indiana's badly gerrymandered electoral maps, you have an opportunity to tell all Hoosiers that their votes and their voices do matter, and to actually make it so. Thank you.
David Green, Janani S. Warren is on deck, and Anna Washer is on deck.
Welcome. Good afternoon. Thank you, Representative Wesco and Senator Ford, for this opportunity to share. My name is Reverend David W. Green, Sr. I serve as the president of the Concerned Clergy of Indianapolis. I'm so excited to be here today to stand in unison with so many others who are concerned citizens. While we're not all under the same banner, we are all committed to the same fight, and that is to see the gerrymandering stop. We want to see an honest and transparent process take place. I've come today to appeal to our legislators' moral conscience. Do the right thing. We're here because we're expecting you to do the right thing. Be honest, be transparent. Do not try to roughshod this through and expect that we will go away and be content. Dr. Martin Luther King said, 64 years ago in a speech, "Give us the ballot." In the speech, he says, if you just give us the opportunity to do what's right, everything will be okay. That's what I'm here to say today. Give us the right, give access to the community that their voices might be heard, because it's the right thing to do. God bless you all.
Thank you.
Janani S. Warren, Anna Washer, and Karen Freeman Wilson on deck.
Right.
Welcome.
Democracy is a verb. It is not just a set of rights written on a document, but rather the actions of millions of people throughout our history who have voted, protested, and in one way or the other pushed for change. Democracy relies on those who participate. But how will Americans continue to participate in their government if they don't have faith in the system? How are they supposed to use their voices if they feel like their voices don't even matter? My name is Jenny Eastwarren. I'm 17 years old and a rising senior at Carmel High School. I am here today because as of this moment, countless Hoosiers do not have a true voice in who represents them. Thanks to Indiana's gerrymandered districts, voters no longer choose their politicians. Politicians choose their voters. And if this continues to go on, the faith that keeps our democracy alive will only decline. To the people in this room, the few people in this room who hold the power to change this, I ask you for something simple: the representation promised by our Constitution. I ask for a transparent redistricting process free of gerrymandering and corruption. I ask for public engagement in the process, for public hearings like this to continue to be held after the maps are drawn. When I, along with much of the youth present today, vote for the first time, I ask to be confident in the power of my vote. None of these asks are partisan. Rather, they are core to an electoral system of, by, and for the people. A system that I know is possible if only our legislators would have the courage to create it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anna Washer, then Karen Freeman Wilson, and then Sherry Frank on deck. Sherry Frank.
Anna Washer. You have the next name?
Karen Freeman Wilson.
Anna Washer here. You're recognized. What are the next names up? Welcome. Anna?
Yes, Anna Wagner.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Are you from Carmel?
Yes.
Okay.
Good afternoon. My name is Anna Wagner. I am here as an independent citizen, Indiana resident, and recent graduate of Indiana University. Go Hoosiers. Yes, thank you. Indiana has been my home my entire life, so today I am here in support of my fellow Hoosiers, many of who have already bravely testified today. Thank you. To publicly express my support for drawing fair, transparent maps in Indiana. None of our citizens' voices should be stifled because of partisan gerrymandering. Thank you.
Thank you.
Karen Freeman Wilson on deck. Sherry Frank. Also on deck, Kelly Hammond.
Karen Freeman Wilson, welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Wesco, and Senator Ford. My name is Karen Freeman Wilson, and I am a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, an international sisterhood of women who have committed their lives to public service. I also served 8 years as mayor of my hometown of Gary, Indiana, and currently serve as the president of the Chicago Urban League. As former Indiana Attorney General and Director of the Indiana Civil Rights Commission, I understand the responsibility of the Indiana General Assembly to draw maps that protect the voting rights of all Hoosiers. And as someone who has worked closely with many of you, I believe you to be a group of well-intentioned men and women who are poised to follow the law, notwithstanding the lure of partisan politics. As a representative of thousands of Deltas who reside in Indiana, I am here to assure you that exercising fairness and discharging your duty to all of the people is something that we are looking for. In my written remarks, I have laid out the text of the 14th and 15th Amendments to the U.S. Constitution, as well as the Voting Rights Act of 1965. I won't repeat that for the sake of brevity, but I will say that they should be the guiding principles as you look at the maps that you will draw for Indiana. The importance of equity and fairness was heightened during the 2026 census and remains top of mind for Delta. We know that this is a once-in-a-decade process, and it's important that all persons are able to exercise their ability to vote, but also have their votes be given equal weight, as well as the opportunity to run for office in a district to represent their communities. In short, this process has a direct impact on the quality of each person's life. The current process has not maximized the opportunity for public participation. That's one of the criteria that the State Redistricting Commission, the independent State Redistricting Commission, highlighted. At this juncture, we would implore you to provide several other opportunities for public comment once the maps are published, and I believe you've said you would do that. Other criteria should be whether districts facilitate competitive elections. We've heard quite a bit about that, and I would simply support the testimony that has already been given. This is especially an important process when you look at the current maps that we have. And it's kind of perplexing when the political demographics of registered voters do not reflect the political demographics of the Indiana General Assembly or the congressional delegation. Indiana is full of safe districts because districts have been gerrymandered to lead to a safe result. It is our hope that Indiana creates a map that is truly representative of the people and allows all to properly participate in the electoral process. Thank you for your consideration, and the members of Delta Sigma Theta sorority are proud civic citizens and look forward to continuing our participation in the process.
Thank you.
Sherry Frank, Kelly Hammond, and Bryce Gustafson on deck.
Go ahead.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Sherry Frank. I'm from Brown County, Indiana, and I want to read a sentence from a letter. We, the undersigned organizations and constituents, are writing to ask that the Indiana redistricting process be fair, transparent, include citizen input, and result in voting districts that empower voters and preserve communities of interest. I would, on behalf of several members of the League of Women Voters of Brown County and several community members, I would like to turn in our first installment of this sign-on letter to the members. Thank you. I wear this sash, Votes for Women, because it reminds me of the long, crazy fight for votes for women. And one of our legislators here told me that he was just surprised because it just seems like common sense to have votes for women. And I wear this for a couple reasons. One is to remind myself of how long it took, how strong our foremothers were. But also because of that common sense statement. It only makes common sense to have fair maps. We shouldn't have 30% of our state positions open every election, uncontested. It only makes sense for fair maps. So thank you for the opportunity to speak, and I look forward to seeing the outcome and having an opportunity to speak again once the maps are drawn. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kelly Hammond, Bryce Gustafson on deck, Nicholas Roberts also on deck.
Welcome.
Hi there, my name is Kelly. I live in the neighborhood right next to Fountain Square in Indianapolis. It takes me about 30 minutes to walk downtown if I walk real fast. I live in Senate District 36, which encompasses my urban neighborhood, but also the fine folks down on the south side of Indy, and a little tail that goes down into Greenwood. A little tail that goes down into Greenwood. Is that good? Okay. I don't quite understand the logic of that tail that goes down into Greenwood, and that's for Senate District 36. I will say that Senate District 32 looks similar, except the tail goes into Indianapolis when the rest of the district is east of the city. So I'm very, very excited to see what y'all come up with in terms of new maps. And I would like to echo folks who have said that we would love the opportunity to comment on what y'all have come up with in the future. Ooh, I'm nervous. The second reason I wanted to testify today is because I think that public policy is so important. Imagine y'all have very difficult jobs. We live in a complex world with complex problems that the private and nonprofit sectors cannot solve on their own. And again, I imagine you have tough jobs, and what you do at the State House impacts us every single day. That brings me to my third point, which is why I took off work to be here today. And that is that I wanted to testify as someone who would love to start a family in this state in the next couple of years. And I'm very concerned that we rank third in the nation for maternal mortality and seventh in the nation for infant mortality. I'm very concerned that there are children getting cancer in Franklin and folks of all ages getting sick in Martinsville because a dry cleaning company dumped chemicals into the ground and the water infrastructure was in such bad shape that it created a whole host of other problems, okay? I don't think that we can say, because we live in a complex world with complex problems, that unfair maps are the reason why we live in a polluted state that has some of the issues I just described. I don't think we can say that. But I think what we can say is that we really need y'all to do a good job. We really need y'all to pay attention to the communities so that if we run into an issue, we know that our state legislators are going to advocate for us the way that we need and deserve. And that doesn't just extend to this redistricting process, it also extends to when you show up for the legislative session in January. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Bryce Gustafson, Nicholas Roberts, and Xavier Ramirez on deck.
Welcome.
Afternoon. My name is Bryce Gustafson, Program Organizer with the Citizens Action Coalition. I want to start by thanking our legislators and all of our fellow Hoosiers for being here today for this extraordinarily important issue. As a member of the All In for Democracy Coalition, CAC supports the findings of the Indiana Citizens Redistricting Commission and encourages the Indiana General Assembly to follow the many fair and practical recommendations within their report. I will refrain from going through all those recommendations, as others have already spoken or will speak to the specifics of those findings, but I will speak for our members and the tens of thousands of other good Hoosiers that we've talked with across the state over the last several years while canvassing on this issue. With firsthand assurity, I can say that the majority of those folks from all different political backgrounds, all different backgrounds who subscribe to all different political ideologies, fundamentally believe in fairness. It's embedded in our Hoosier DNA. But on this issue, many have lost faith in the Indiana General Assembly's ability to provide that fairness. Most especially our fellow Hoosiers who struggle every day to put food on their tables, pay their ever-rising bills, and constantly have to worry if they can lead a decent, dignified life here in Indiana. Those folks wonder if their voices are being heard, if their interests are truly being represented here. We all know the deep partisan history of this process. It's as old as the state of Indiana itself. But this time, we encourage this body, in our present moment of unique challenges, to break the cycle and strive to make this process as transparent and fair as possible. Together, we can restore Hoosiers' faith in our state, tackle those present and future challenges, and make Indiana a place that finally works for us all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nicholas Roberts, then Xavier Ramirez on deck, and Rima Shahid on deck.
Welcome.
Hello. My name is Nicholas Roberts. I am a lifelong resident of Central Indiana, and I am currently an economics student at IUPUI. I am here to sort of give an alternative to what is currently being proposed. And there's a lot of talk in these circles about there's no such thing as truly nonpartisan gerrymandering, but there's an alternative. As an example, the state of Iowa is the most nonpartisan of all the states. Iowa is, by all mostly accounts, a red state. However, they have probably the most fair process in the country. And the way they have it is they have an explicitly nonpartisan group that does it through the state appointed. And what it has produced is 4 congressional districts, which have 0 counties split. And 3 of the 4 districts are incredibly competitive, all within a few points. Indiana is not even close to that. We have lots of counties split. You can look at our legislature itself. For the state senate districts, we have 9 districts in Marion County, but only 3 of them are entirely within the district. Point is, there's a lot of splits. There's a lot of things which divide communities. Indiana's among the worst, and all the pessimism saying that we have no chance of truly solving it is just wrong. We have the potential to solve it, but it'll take political courage by people on this side of the aisle, because unfortunately, there will be a time when Democrats are back in power, and it will not be as much fun when Democrats are the ones drawing the laws to really make the districts themselves. But I have hope that if people really have the courage to get it done, we can have a process that can withstand decades with fair districts, can really make things better for our entire state. So thank you.
Thank you, Nicholas.
Xavier Ramirez, then Rima Shahid, and Barry Levitt on deck.
Hello, thank you, committee members. It's a pleasure to be able to be here today and speak to you about this issue and how incredibly important it is for all of us. My name is Xavier Ramirez. I'm one of the Democratic members of the ICRC, or Indiana Citizens Redistricting Commission. And one of the things that I want to talk about is my experience on this commission as a youthful member. It was really, really cool to see the student from Carmel High School come up and speak. As a graduate from Carmel High School, not only does that make me proud, but I think that it exemplifies that Indiana in and of itself has these incredible school systems, especially from my hometown, which is in Hamilton County. But we face an imminent risk, which is losing that amazing potential to other states or to elsewhere. When we, as a youth, do not feel that we are being represented, it forces us to leave because we want to feel heard. And so it is so important that throughout this process you listen to our voices and listen to the ICRC's recommendations, because what you'll be doing is showing students such as myself that my voice matters in this process. And so this is a challenge to all of you today, to show me that my voice matters, to show me that bipartisanship matters, and to show me that democracy matters. Thank you.
Rima Shahid, followed by Barry Levitt and Riley Foster on deck.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Wesco, Senator Ford, and members of the committee. Thank you for allowing us to be here and weigh in. As was said many times, I wish that we had the same ability once the maps were drawn, but one can hope. Good afternoon. My name is Rima Shahid, and I am the Executive Director of Women for Change. Women for Change is a statewide, nonpartisan grassroots organization. And at Women for Change, we work to educate, equip, and mobilize Hoosiers to create positive change for women. You see here in the state of Indiana, we are the majority, your supermajority at 51% of the population. As an organization, Women for Change was founded to advocate for less representative views. We believe that gerrymandering perpetuates divisiveness and cements it for decades to come. A study that we at Women for Change commissioned revealed that Indiana is one of the most extreme examples of gerrymandering in the United States. Conducted by nationally recognized independent expert, Professor Christopher Warshaw, the study found that Indiana's electoral maps tilted more in favor of one party than 95% of all maps enacted in the United States over the past 50 years. This imbalance hurts Indiana in many ways. It drives out voters. It makes people not believe in our government. And it removes the competitiveness. It also stops people from engaging in the cornerstone of our democracy, voting. Women for Change is calling, with the results of Professor Warshaw's research in hand, we're calling for reform in Indiana's redistricting process. We want 4 things. We want the Redistricting Commission to open its map drawing process to public scrutiny. We want to disclose fully the funding and the process by which the maps are drafted. We want public to be able to weigh into the future of Indiana by way of the maps. We want all of the meetings to be in public, and we want fair maps. Indiana deserves a fair and transparent redistricting process. We want a redistricting process that favors the future of Indiana, the future generations, not one that defends the status quo. Thank you.
Thank you.
Barry Levitt, followed by Riley Foster and Barbara Bowling Williams on deck. Riley Foster.
Welcome.
And then Maria Bushmaker then would be on deck after Barbara Bowling Williams.
My name is Riley Foster, and I'm 19 years old. And while I come from Noblesville, Indiana, I'm also a Bloomington resident, and I represent Common Cause of Indiana. But most importantly, I'm a young Hoosier, and I am here to negate the opinion of people thinking that young people don't care about the future of their state or about their own future. They care very much, and like my friend Xavier said earlier today, that we are waiting for change because we do not feel represented. And while I had a few concerns specifically to prepare for today, I realize that they're all moot causes unless we have our districts able to be competitive and representative of us. If the legislators in charge of the redistricting process here today insist on little transparency and the lack of thoroughness for our new districts, we will see thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of students and young people leave our state because they do not feel represented. You see, unless you show and listen and give independence to the redistricting process, what we will have is a supermajority, again, picking the voters who elect them rather than voters electing their own representatives. Unless the legislators here today promise for a more equitable and competitive districting process to be formed, concerns we have will not be addressed for 10 years, 20 years, and maybe 30 years to come. It is time for open and independent redistricting, and it is time for people to have a say in their futures because too much time has already been stolen from us to properly redistrict our state so that communities of similar concerns have their voices uplifted and not diluted. Thank you.
Thank you. Have Barbara Bowling-Williams. Barbara Bowling-Williams next, with Maria Bushmaker and Alicia Madhyarvad on deck.
Maria from Carmel. Welcome.
Thank you. Believe it or not, my name is actually pronounced Maria Bashmakov. I know my handwriting might be chicken scratch, but it's okay. Hello, my name is Maria Bashmakov, and I'm a citizen of Carmel, a graduate of IU, and a member of the College Democrats at IU exec team. Believe it or not, I was actually born down the street on IU's campus at IU Hospital, and I'm Indiana born and raised. But in my personal life, I'm also a passionate rugby coach and a loving aunt, and I'm here for those people that I really care about. I'm here vouching for their future as I work with a variety of athletes, with many being on the LGBTQ+ spectrum, minorities, or those who care about the environment from the youth to adult level. But this is just a sliver of my identity and theirs. We need fair maps for their future, as these individuals already do or will be voting real soon, and we cannot silence their votes and beliefs. As you can see by this room, it is clear that people want fair maps. If we want a better world, if we want to address climate change, we cannot silence our youth and all the other citizens of Indiana. I want a public process for redistricting and less gerrymandering, and I hope we see that soon. It's absurd to even be having this conversation, as it really just seems like common sense. Thank you.
Barbara Bullray-Williams. On deck, Alicia Madhyarvad and Marcy Bookwalter.
Barbara from Gary. Read the next name.
Alicia Madhyarvad.
Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Alessia Madhyarvad, and I'm a proud Indiana University Bloomington student. Go Hoosiers again. But more importantly, I'm a voter. I'm here to ask the committee to end the practice of gerrymandering and to give Hoosiers the fair maps that we deserve. We've seen attacks on our democracy over the last, decades, but more importantly, they've become stronger in the last few months. By continuing to draw unfair and partisan maps, many of our elected officials on both sides have become complacent and frankly lazy when it comes to meeting the needs of their constituents, which is why they're elected in the first place. Why would they need to try when they know that they'll have a relatively easy win? Every time we draw these maps, we lose the trust of everyday voters. We lose the idea that every vote is an equal vote, and more importantly, we lose the crucial parts of our democracy. As a young person, we deserve a prosperous state with fair maps, competitive districts, and elected officials who actually fight for the needs of Hoosiers. What you're doing today will affect our elections for decades. And you know what? The public deserves real input, and we haven't had that many. I want everyone here today, especially the elected officials, and especially elected officials who think that gerrymandering is perfectly fine, to look out into the crowd. Feel free to look behind you and see who's watching. What are you scared of? Who are you scared of? Young voters? Black and brown voters? Why are you so scared to face voters in a truly competitive election? And just remember, before I sit back down, that every single one of our votes matter equally. And we won't forget what you're doing next election day. Thank you.
Marcy Bookwalter on deck, Elid Nichols Kaufman, and Ethan Stower.
Marcy Bookwalter from Indianapolis. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Mary Bookwalter of Indianapolis, my writing. I'm a proud member of Indiana and also the Indiana Forest Alliance. I'm also a resident of Senate District 28, and for 2 years, no phone call, email, written correspondence has been answered. Things go on without me, and I'm sorry to confess I have been unladylike in the last few I've sent. Not helpful, but bitter. But anyway, life goes on. But I think that the great issues of the day involve climate change and the preservation of our natural world. And I do not see the concerns that many Hoosiers care about. And I agree with Representative Pierce. This is a fun exercise without facts. But the facts are climate change is real, and I think it's time for the competition of ideas to be met with and to the concerns to be addressed. This has gotten to a dangerous level. As you know, Monday, various reports are released. But I would say, lastly, the current redistricting, I feel, is what one would call, I think it's familiar to all Americans, taxation without representation. And I don't hear that addressed here. I pay and I'm mute in so many ears. As a former Marine officer, I had pledged many times to defend things, and I don't see a concomitant investment in democracy by my peers, and I thank you for this time.
Thank you.
Elid Nichols Kaufman, on deck, Ethan Stower, and Claire Kenshiro.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Elad Nichols Kaufman. I'm from here in Indianapolis, and I'm a recent graduate of Shortridge High School in Indianapolis Public Schools. So, I just turned 18 about a month ago, so obviously I'm planning to vote in the coming election. So the lines you, members of the committees assembled here, draw today will be the lines that I will be first voting with as and my people of my generation, my age, as we first vote. And the fact that I am voting does make me an anomaly a little bit of people my age. I know that's been addressed by some previous speakers here, but I think it's still really important to emphasize how dangerous it is to have a politically apathetic population of young people. Because if you don't have young people care about the population, you're not necessarily going to care about the democracy, care about the governance. You're not necessarily going to have an involved populace in the future. And democracy without an involved populace simply cannot be a democracy anymore. It is a fundamental danger to the way we run our country. And this is why I think it's really paramount in the task that's before you today to focus on making an elections, looking forward to elections to districts that are properly able to open up young people, and not just young people, people of all ages, to have democratic representation, districts that actually reflect the population, not skewed to one party that's in power or the other. Without districts that can properly represent the broad range of political perspectives that we see here in the state, and without districts that properly represent each community, not shattering them up into pieces, citizens of the state of Indiana cannot be involved. And without involvement of the citizens, there is no democracy. So what you're doing today is just as important as what people do on the global stage in deciding the fate of international democracy. What happens here in Indiana, in the very center of the United States, is key to developments around the world. So I really hope that for the sake of all our future, both mine as a young person and the near future for everyone in this chamber, you take into consideration the fact that politicians simply can't continue choosing their constituencies and choose a fair process for this redistricting and commit to having a nonpartisan redistricting for future elections. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ethan Stower. On deck, Claire Kanshiro and Sage Mehta.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ethan. I may be a high school student, but I and most of my peers here today will actually be able to vote in the next election, and we are very politically active and not afraid to get out and campaign for candidates and causes, so please consider our thoughts. Politicians choosing their constituents is not democratic. It's not. Those in power should not have the ability to choose who they represent. The people need to choose who represents them. You cannot waste the votes of those who disagree with you by cramming them into several districts and splitting their power in other districts and then call that a democratic system. We don't ask that you give Democrats or Republicans an advantage, but merely that you draw fair and nonpartisan districts such that the people of Indiana are fairly represented in this state house and at our capital. As we've heard today, Hoosiers from different political perspectives support fair and transparent redistricting. Let's not be a state where districts turn into snakes with tentacles like octopuses that split communities and are maximally used to scoop up certain votes and suppress others. Let's not be a state by the politicians for the politicians instead of by the people for the people. So once again, politicians choosing their voters or gerrymandering is not a democratic system by any means. Thank you.
Claire Kanshiro. On deck, Sage Mehta and Greg Catter.
Welcome.
My name is Claire Kanshiro, and this past May, I graduated from the International School of Indiana in Indianapolis. And I wasn't born here in Indiana, but I was brought here and raised here. And India is my home. And this fall, I'll be leaving the state for the first time in 18 years to attend college at Princeton. And I know, I'm one of the young folks that leaves Indiana, part of the brain drain, but I think I can speak to why we leave, why we look for opportunities elsewhere, and why we may not come back. In March of this year, I turned 18, and as a student who had volunteered as a poll worker on the campaigns of some of the politicians right before me, I was looking forward to earning my right to vote, to aging into it. I registered to vote. I will vote in Indiana by mail. But my vote won't count here, not like it should. Listen to me, youth, coming of age, adolescent voters don't trust that our votes will count. Listen to me. Young folks don't trust that the elections matter, that the foundation of our democracy matters. And does this not concern you? Here's why. And I want to thank Jayant, a Carmel student, for crunching these numbers for me. In 2020, 56% of the votes cast in the Senate race, in the Indiana Senate race, were for Republicans. But the Republicans won 72% of the seats. Consider this, in our national Congress, 56% of the seats wouldn't even overcome the filibuster, but it was converted into a 72% supermajority. This is what gerrymandering looks like. And I know some people may argue that Senate districts represent regions, but let's look at the House districts. The House that represents the people, not the land, the population, the popular vote. It should, it must represent the people. Again, in 2020, 59% of the vote was cast for Republican candidates. That still wouldn't overcome the filibuster. And yet, Republicans won 71% of the seats. This is what gerrymandering looks like. When we see these differences between the voters and the legislators, we need to ask, who are you disenfranchising? Who has lost their power because of your actions? It's black voters, it's brown voters, it's my father, an Asian American. It is the young voters from the city, the poor voters. It is the voters of the minority political party. It's my vote. Suppressive voting laws and partisan redistricting are disenfranchising voters. This is racist, this is classist, this is wrong.
My vote and our votes won't count unless we redistrict in an equitable way. My vote won't count until the votes of all the people in the cities, the black voters, the brown voters, the minority voters, all voters are equally represented. We need transparency in this process. We need to see who you are enfranchising and who you are disenfranchising. We need to see the process, to see the data you use. Let us see the maps. Comment on the maps. For the people to choose the map that represents us best. Let us vote. Let us determine whether or not to approve those maps. Open the doors because the kids are telling you to do better.
Sage Mehta. Sage Mehta. On deck, Greg Catter and Chris Harris.
Welcome.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sage Mehta, and I'm a senior at Carmel High School and have lived here my entire life. First, like my predecessors, I would like to thank you all for providing this opportunity to speak out about the ideas we support. I personally want to extend the gravity of the matter at hand and build upon the calls for a more equitable redistricting system. As we all know by now, past Indiana districting maps have been constructed upon ploys of gerrymandering and the prioritization of partisanship before the common good of the people. Thus, presently, with the chance to do better this time and nourish our democracy, we must. Just by comparing the basic metrics of votes for each party by electoral outcomes, it is clear the mass discrepancies that plague us at the moment. Extending upon some of the data that Claire referenced, and by our friend Jayant, he compiled these numbers from the 2020 elections, and comparing the percentages specifically amongst Indiana House seats, there was over a 10% markup in the amount of Republicans elected and over a 10% drop for the Democrats as compared with the respective votes for each party. And for the 25 Senate seats that were up for re-election in 2020, the inconsistencies were even more dramatic. There was a 15.5% skew of seats towards the Republican Party as compared with our votes. Hence, while there will inexorably be other factors that take play in our elections, it is clear that the present system does not even come close in accurately representing the view of Hoosiers, and that is because it was manufactured without the intention of ever doing so. So as the redistricting process continues, I believe that your intentions as public servants to democracy should be framed foremost with the goal of making the new district maps as fair and reflective of our communities as possible. And I implore that all measures, decisions, and outside participants to this process be subject to full transparency before the public so that we can see how well you uphold these goals and morals. As an American, as a Hoosier, and as someone that will be experiencing these outputs of your decisions for decades to come, I hope that you will all work towards mapping out a more impartial and honorable Indiana. Thank you.
Thank you. It is 3:02, and we still have 13 people testifying. I would like to give everyone the opportunity to speak. I would ask you to summarize your comments, maybe take one paragraph if you have it written or your summary, and seek to do it in 60 seconds or less, but we want to give everyone the opportunity to speak. So could we continue to recognize speakers?
Greg Catter. Greg Catter. Chris Harris. Oh, are you Greg?
And who do we have on deck?
On deck, we have Chris Harris and Charles Taylor.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Representative Wesco, Senator Ford, and members of the committee. My name is Christopher Harris. I'm a proud native of the still city of Gary, and I reside in the great city of Hammond. I'm grateful for your time today to listen to us. I know that we've hit a lot of points throughout this public testimony, but I want to talk about courage in this process. 4 years ago tomorrow, I found myself in Charlottesville, Virginia, I was working on assignment for a general contractor in Richmond, Virginia. That Saturday morning, I saw what had transpired on the Friday previous. And I was compelled to go because I wanted to be a part of the anti-protest to show that this is our democracy. We don't stand up to hatred. We don't stand up for disrespect. That's not what America is about. Now, on my way from Richmond to Charlottesville, I was getting text messages from my friends and family telling me, Chris, do not go. This is not your normal protest. This is people want to inflict harm. And while I was driving, I was terrified, but I was just compelled to go anyway because I wanted to show that this is not what America is about. On the way there, I was wondering, how did our country get here? How did we devolve to such a decorum where we could not even speak to one another, where we could not have a conversation? People want to be fair. People want to be represented. People want to have competitive districts in the state, and we want to have things done. We want to make sure that people are eating, that people have good jobs, people are trained. You've heard, from the public about what we want. Our report is there to show you by congressional
Chris, if you
district.
could conclude your remarks. I'm sorry to push it along, but we're past our.
Sure. So I implore you to find the courage. I know that there are power structures that are pressuring you to proceed and move forward and create unfair maps. I ask and implore you that you have the courage like how I did when I was on 4th and Water Street and narrowly missed that attack. When I drove home, I was like, why did I do this? Why did I do this? But now, when I drove here today, I understood the importance of why I went to Charlottesville is to make sure that you understand that you have the opportunity to save democracy. Indiana can be a leader across this country if you make sure that we have fair maps in this state. And you can lead this country from hyper-partisanship and me back to the middle so we can get things done. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Come on.
Greg Catter. On deck, Charles Taylor and Kyle Galley.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you to the chairs and the members of the committee for this opportunity. I'll keep it brief. My name is Charles Taylor. I'm a member of the Indiana Citizens Redistricting Commission. I'm one of the members who is neither a Democrat nor a Republican. I reside in Muncie, Indiana. In my day job, I'm a political scientist, but I'm here today in my personal capacity as a member of the commission. Many people have talked about the recommendations in our report, and I'd like to just talk briefly about why these are important. The first three have to do with competitive districts, preserving communities of interest, and avoiding needless division of cities and counties into more districts than their population would justify. These came out of citizen concerns that they shared with us at our series of hearings. These first three issues are really about effective representation. In a representative democracy, we depend on elected officials to listen to their
If you could please bring your comments to a
and
close.
translate those.
If you could begin to bring your comments to a close, please. If you could begin to close your comments,
Will
please,
do.
just to summarize.
That's a difficult issue when we divide the cities into very small districts and mix them with constituents with different issues. It makes that job even more difficult. As far as our fourth recommendation about open and transparent process, I'm surprised that this even needs to be justified. In a democracy, we depend on important decisions. This is certainly an important decision being made in the daylight where people can see the information that's going into it. It's important for the integrity of the election process. We've heard a lot about that. The integrity of the redistricting process is fully as important as every other part of the election process. So I'd implore the committee to, if nothing else, be open and transparent about all the decisions and the information going into it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kyle Galley. On deck, Phyllis Schmidt and Carol Stevens.
Welcome.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kyle. I live in the city of Indianapolis over in Irvington in Senate District 28 there, and can say the same thing. If you want to look at a fun gerrymandered district, please look up State Senate District 28 because it looks like a middle finger is sticking into the city of Indianapolis. And that's exactly how I feel about my vote because it feels like a big F you to me considering who I'm represented by. So I want to just have a few comments, make it brief here. The first one is, what a time to schedule this meeting, by the way, Wednesday afternoon, when a lot of people cannot be here to voice their concern. It'd be, all the other meetings were in the evenings, like 4 to 6 p.m., but of course you put the one in Indianapolis where the working class people are from 1 to 3 in the afternoon. That's very generous of you. So I also have to ask the question of the chairman himself. He had a bill put in front of him to make this a nonpartisan process last year. He chose not to bring a vote upon that. That was in front of him. It was passed by the Senate. It was passed to him for the House to put a vote on it. He chose not to vote on it so he could have the power to oversee this decision.
Could you please bring your comments to a close?
Yeah, of course, because I'm calling you out. So just make sure you pay attention to him as he does this, because he had a chance to make this nonpartisan and he chose not to. Thank you.
Thank you.
Phyllis Schmidt. On deck, Carol Stevens and Mark Spellbring.
Welcome.
Okay, go ahead. My name is Carol Stevens, and I've lived in Indiana for about 30 years. And I'm going to make a point that builds on what you've heard, but it's very different in really significant ways, and I think it should be very important to all the members of this committee. And here's the point. Indiana's partisan gerrymandering is bad for Indiana business. Now, why do I say that? Well, think about what these young people have said today. Any business, small businesses, large businesses, established businesses, startup businesses depend on a pipeline of people coming into those businesses. And much of that pipeline is younger people. Let's take a situation like, let's take a big business, Eli Lilly and Company. Lilly is only going to thrive and help build the Indiana economy if they can get good people out of schools, and including our wonderful universities in this state. And it's not only recruiting, also it's retaining.
If you could please begin to close.
To have a reputation as a progressive and desirable place to live for people working in Indiana businesses that support this economy, you need to do the right thing and stop the gerrymandering. Thank you.
Thank you.
Phyllis Schmidt. On deck, Mark Spellbring and Daniel Tajwar. Mark Spellbring, you're up. On deck, Daniel Tajwar and Robbie Slaughter.
Welcome.
Hello, and thank you. I'm Mark Spellbring from Rockville in Park County. Came to discuss briefly 2 points. One was going to be on nesting, as was mentioned earlier, so I'll make that very short. I don't know that that is the best way to do it, but I think if alternatives are developed, that needs to be considered, is to have Senate districts then subdivided into House districts. My other point, for which many may think I'm delusional, is that I think the residential locations of legislators and potential candidates needs to be completely ignored. Now, that's going to be difficult to do, so that actually harkens back to the idea of a redistricting commission. But I think speakers have talked about tails on districts and things like that. I got a feeling if you looked into most of those, you would find someone's house in that little tail that was put in there for some particular reason. So to the extent that it is possible, and it's under a redistricting, it would be possible. It'll be difficult with the legislators doing this, but ignore where people live, individual people.
Please bring your comments to a close.
Candidates. Thank you.
Thank you.
Daniel Tajwar. On deck, Robbie Slaughter and Roger Dietz.
Welcome.
Thank you. Just testing. All right. Hello, my name is Daniel Tajwar. I am a Carmel High School alumnus, 20 years old. Actually spent the last 2 years of my life actually living in the United Arab Emirates. So I think the first thing I just want to say real quickly is that we talk a lot about the hypothetical loss of democracy, but I just want to say what it means to me when you actually lose that experience, because that's what I've been living for the past 2 years. I thought a lot about seeing my country fall apart from abroad and seeing the actual disintegration of our democratic institutions. And so coming back here, being able to speak on the one hand is very heartening for me, to be able to actually, be able to participate in the process. But at the same time, considering the amount of voices we've raised in this committee today, it almost feels like we're screaming into the void, considering the fact that we aren't very sure if our comments are actually going to be taken into consideration. So I just wanted to make 2 quick points. The first being that gerrymandering is an empirical fact. We've gone through all the facts we've already discussed here today, and I think that if we're going to deny that reality, not do anything to rectify that fact,
If you could begin to close your comments.
Thank you. That won't be any different from the climate change denialism that also pervades our states. Secondly, it's important that that when we're talking about communities of interest, we're not only talking about keeping our communities together, keeping our counties and other political subdivisions together, but we're also talking about representing diversity of thought, diversity of political ideology, and diversity of opinions as well. And those are also communities of interest. So I hope that we get to be not only heard, but listened to as well. So thank you.
Robbie Slaughter, on deck, Roger Dietz, and Jacob Schwartz.
Welcome.
Anyone else notice how strange this is? We've been here for about 2 hours. It's the 9th meeting like this. It's the topic all over the country, and there's tremendous passion in this room, but basically no disagreement. We pretty much all agree we should have fair districts, right? Equal size, equal representation, try to make them competitive. Pretty much everyone agrees to that. So why is there so much passion for something that pretty much everybody agrees on? It's because we don't believe it's going to happen. We don't believe it. If we did, we wouldn't be here. We would say, oh, they got that taken care of. It's a pretty straightforward math problem. The parameters are well known. It's going to be solved. So I think the question should not be, how do we redistrict? It's, why do we not believe it's going to happen? Why don't we trust our representatives to do what everybody knows is the right thing? I think that's the question we have to ask. And I think the real answer is that we are not the constituents. The money is the constituent.
Thank you.
Roger Dietz, on deck, Jacob Schwartz, and Catherine Hall.
Hello. Thank you, Chair and Committee, for the time and the opportunity to listen to Hoosiers. My name is Roger Dietz. I'm a lifelong Hoosier and founder of Indiana Tech for Progress, which is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that's increasing civic engagement within Indiana's technology community. And in recent memory, Indiana has gained a reputation as not being a terribly welcoming place, and that shows up in the brain drain and in our inability to attract talent and capital. And that reputation is made possible by a lack of accountability amongst lawmakers who are pushing priorities not in line with the desires of the citizenry, and that's made possible by districts which are not fair and not competitive. And so my ask of you as a business leader and parent and Hoosier and one who desperately believes that Indiana can be a prosperous place is to do the right thing, draw fair maps, be transparent, and encourage cooperation and fair competition, because that's how Indiana will remain competitive in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jacob Schwartz, on deck, Catherine Hall, and Jeff Stant.
Alrighty, good afternoon. My name is Jacob, and I'd just like to thank everybody for being here and giving us this chance. I'm going into my senior year at IU, studying political science with a minor in ethics. And originally, before I got my time cut short, I was going to talk about the history of democracy philosophically, going back to Greece. And you can see on the mural up there, we've got Apollo and Pegasus. So obviously, we try and draw a through line from that ancient history of democracy. But now I want to talk about how Hoosiers have a right to have their voice heard. We have a right to self-determination. And going to bring it up to the present more so. Benjamin Franklin was asked near the founding of this country what type of government it was going to be, and he replied, a republic, if you can keep it. And right now we are losing our republic because our representatives in that republic are not being chosen by us, they are choosing the voters that they want. And at Gettysburg, Abraham Lincoln expressed his wish that government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from this earth. And now I know the GOP likes to claim Lincoln as a political predecessor to them, so I just ask, why are you trying so hard to kill something that he fought to save? And looking around the world, we see places like Hungary experiencing democratic backsliding, where
Please bring your comments to close.
One last note, Kurt. where they can have a minority of voters get a supermajority. And I feel we're moving towards that with being more gerrymandered than 95% of maps in the last half century. So, speaking of democratic backsliding, the USA is actually no longer a democracy according to Polity 5. We have lost our democratic status. And so my last statement is give us fair maps, make every vote count, and give Hoosiers their voices back.
Catherine Hall, on deck, Jeff Stant.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Wesco and Chairman Ford. I'm Katrina Hall. I'm representing the members of Indiana Farm Bureau. My comments will be a little bit different than what some have mentioned, but mostly I'm here to represent the people in rural areas. In a redistricting process, I think it would be logical that you would start with the most dense areas of the state and build out from there. But in the criteria that is required for redistricting, I'm just going to focus on, obviously, contiguity is not generally a problem in our state, but I would say that please consider the other three criteria as something to think about as everybody's talked about fairness, and honestly, fairness is in the, that word is in the eye of the beholder, but I do think that compactness is one of the things that is an issue. So large, drawn-out areas. There are some examples that you know of the most rural districts where they might have, I don't know, I think Representative Nagel maybe has 13 counties. I mean, spread across, and one of our congressional districts, well, actually a lot of them are, one of them is 3 hours from one end to the next. So we do need to try to figure out.
Please bring your comments to a close.
Oh, I will. I will. And so the communities of interest is one of the things that I hope you will consider strongly, as well as observing political lines, because in that, I'm a big believer in local government, and you definitely will be able to keep communities of interest together where folks are really forming those in a new way as they are thinking about economic development actually right now. So nevertheless, please consider the rural areas and how those folks would be represented when they actually are spread across more than 2/3 of our state. And so
thank you.
Thank you.
Jeff Stant.
Welcome.
Thank you, Chairman Wesco and Ford and members of the committee. I'm Jeff Stant. I'm the Executive Director of the Indiana Forest Alliance, and I've cut out one whole page of my testimony just to make the 3 points at the end of it. The Indiana Forest Alliance, number one, urges you to hold more public hearings after the census data has been received and provided to the public for review for at least 30 days. Provide proposed new districts to the public based on this data to review for 2 to 3 weeks prior to these hearings. Where possible, district lines should not needlessly or excessively divide communities of interest, such as cities. The bottom line is that the public cannot be expected to intelligently comment on new districts and their boundaries until they have had time to see this data and how it's being used to draw district lines to ensure those lines are being drawn to provide for adequate representation of their voices. Number two, make these new public meetings more accessible to the public than these scheduled hearings have been.
Please bring your comments to a close.
All right. More public input in the redistricting process. These are 2-hour hearings. The people we're representing in Yellowwood, Morgan Monroe, Owen Putnam, Martin, Green Sullivan State Forest have to drive nearly 2 hours one way just to get to them, have to take the day off work. Why would they do that? You want to encourage that. So we encourage you to hold more hearings in more places around the state so that people throughout the state, in rural areas too, can participate in this process that's so essential to our democracy. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes all those who have signed up to testify. I'd like to recognize Senate Minority Leader Greg Taylor to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Chairman Wesco, Chairman Ford. I didn't want to speak. Well, I think this is open to the public. So, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate you for giving me an opportunity to speak. After I get finished, some of you might be confused about my testimony, so let me just dive into it. I don't want to make this a partisan issue. As the leader of the Indiana Senate Democrats, I believe that my job is to hold everyone, including our elected officials, accountable, Democrat or Republican. And so, in doing so, there are a couple Republicans that I want to thank for supporting my legislation that would have put into place during this legislative session standards for this redistricting this year. For some of you who may not have been available because you were working, that was a discussion we had in the Senate. I offered an amendment. Senator Greg Walker supported that amendment. Senator Vanita Becker supported that amendment. Currently, the committee that you are sitting in front of, as far as the Senate goes, is represented by 7 Republicans and 2 Democrats. The only way that that changes is if we have a different makeup of the Indiana General Assembly. You could call that partisan, you could call that whatever you want, but that's the truth. Not criticizing any of my colleagues for their no vote on my amendment that would have made redistricting a lot more transparent. When you walk out in the hall today, here's what I want you to keep in mind, because hopefully we'll be able to have this discussion again. If you look at Senate District 36, which encompasses the southern portion of Marion County and then a portion of Johnson County, please recognize that my colleague Jack Sandlin was not in the legislature when that district was drawn. He happened to live in Johnson County, and that district was drawn before he was a member of this body. When you talk about Senate District 28 having the finger into Marion County, what we have to be cognizant of, and I ask you to do the same, is we can't let that happen again. Please, I implore my colleagues, don't do that again to the Marion County voters on the east side. Senate District 25 and 26, which encompasses Madison and Delaware County. If you go out to that map, you will see that that district is drawn with a C, and then in the middle is Anderson and Muncie. Please don't let that happen again. That does not represent Indiana. And finally, for those of you who may have driven 2 hours for Allen County, I want to say personally, I apologize, especially to those that live on the south side of Allen County. When you go out and you look at that map, look at how southern Allen County has been diluted through the representation of 3 state senators for one county on the south side of Johnson County. Please do not let that happen again. And I want to finally say and thank my colleagues for at least holding these hearings. As a leader, I happen to be able to sit in on a discussion with the leadership about these hearings. I asked that the hearings be at least 4 hours. I asked that the hearings happen after we got the maps. It did not happen. I've learned over my 12 years of experience, what I do is I keep fighting and I move forward. So what I want to say to you is, even if nothing happens that benefits any of us who all testified in support of having standards, be encouraged. Because when I stood here 12 years ago, we had never seen someone who looks like me lead a caucus. And Indiana, which we all represent, has for the first time in 200 years in this state's history, has elected someone that looks like me to lead a caucus. And we should be proud. So when we walk out of here today, let's all walk out as Hoosiers. And I'm encouraged that my colleagues have heard these words, and I know you're going to do the right thing. So thank you, guys.
Thank you, Senator Taylor.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator J.D. Ford for closing comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not really a closing comment, more of a question. We've heard from Hoosiers today and last weekend about having another round of hearings when you release the maps and before we take our final vote. So can you right here and now, in front of all of the folks here gathered, guarantee that that second round of hearings will happen?
You were recognized for a comment, not a question, Senator. But we will have hearings here in the House and Senate like the normal process is, and there will be additional opportunity for public comment at that time. Sir, I answered the question.
Yes. Will you guarantee that the maps, that the public will have enough time to analyze and digest those
The
maps?
maps will be available for the public to consider at that time.
Okay.
Senator Cordora.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was very proud to travel the state with respected members of the committee, and I shared a few thoughts, and I'll be very brief because I want to be respectful that you stayed here and you didn't have the full time to speak. I came to the United States as an immigrant, and similar to Senator Greg Taylor, I became the first in 200 years who represent a certain minority in Indiana to get elected to office. I came from a region of the world where people struggle with democracy till today, civil wars, revolutions, and so on. And I've seen when democracy is not taught to generations of people how they lose that. And as we grow and our young kids grow, I don't want them, whether Republican or Democrats, libertarians or unaffiliated, to live in a society to think that democracy is one flavor of politics. And I don't want that to happen to my beloved country here in the United States. I worked for 2 Republican governors as a Democrat, and I worked for a Democratic mayor. And what I promise you is this: for us to bring our nation together, to bring all of us together, we must set aside the conflict of interest, the ethical conflict of interest of having legislators draw their own districts. I don't think it's appropriate. I don't think it's right. In every profession in our country, we have to sign disclosure forms about conflicts of interest, except for us here in the General Assembly as it relates to redistricting or to elections. We talked this last session about the integrity of elections and the ballots and so on. We cannot talk about the integrity of elections and not speak about the integrity of the redistricting process. We talked extensively how we want to work as Republicans and Democrats united to serve the public, to come up with good public policy, yet with some good reasons that I will not blame the chair or my Republican colleagues for the timing of the census and COVID and all of that. But I think we still have the opportunity to be fully transparent, to communicate to the public, share the maps, and allow those who are voiceless, those who told us from across the state that you do not represent me. And my response that I will conclude with, here's what I told them. Hold me on the record. Put my words on the record. Hypothetically, if the cost, the political cost for Indiana to come up with an independent redistricting commission is my personal seat, I will resign today.
Senator John Crane. Senator John Crane is recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just want to make a comment that was something that I shared at the meetings on the north end of the state. First of all, thank you to you, Mr. Chairman, and Senator Ford for your leadership in guiding these conversations. And most of all, thank you to the public for coming out. One of the things that I share with the fourth grade groups that used to come to the State House before social distancing prevented trips to the State House last year is that they now stepped into a small minority of Hoosiers who've actually taken the time to darken the doors of our State House and let their voices be heard. And for you all to come and to be a part of this, and for those that came to the public meetings across the state, I really, really do appreciate that. It's difficult to share the level of frustration that we as members also feel because of the timing of the census numbers and time constraints and all these things. But one of the things that I also shared, it's if there's a silver lining in this, as I see it, it's that had the normal course of events played out the way it traditionally does, in the legislative session, the redistricting issue would have been in the mix with any number of other major issues that we had to deal with in this legislative session. The way it's playing out at this point, as much as it may not be ideal, gives us the chance to have sole focus on this so that we can hear directly from more people, that we can be able to factor in all the comments that we've heard and to be able to apply those to what is obviously going to be a very challenging process. So again, I appreciate all of you who've taken the time to not only come, but those of you who've shared, and especially those young people who have braved the experience of coming to testify in a legislative committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Crane. Representative Pryor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairs, Chairman Ford and Chairman Wesco. This has been a very interesting process. We've traveled the state. This is our 9th meeting. And I traveled the northern part of the state, 4 locations. And as I've listened to the people in their testimony, there has certainly been a common theme throughout, regardless of where we have been. Now, there have been some specific concerns for some locations. For instance, in northern Indiana, there was concerns that the most populous location, Lake County, did not have a hearing there. So there were some specifics for particular locations. However, there has been a common theme threaded throughout all the hearings that I had. I have been very encouraged in hearing all of the young people that came and testified today, and the young people that came also in Lafayette. What concerns me is the fact that they feel disillusioned and concerned with the process and feeling that their voices have not been heard. But some consistent things that have been very loud and clear at all 4 in this, which is the 5th location, has been people want to have a transparent process. They want to see the information. They want to see the data that is used. People want to have competitive districts. They want to make sure that legislators are listening to and paying attention to their concerns. They want to make sure that communities of interest stay together and not have chopped up districts. People want to have more hearings. People, are also concerned that these meetings are held during times in which a lot of people are at work as well. But it's definitely more hearings when people have the maps and are able to actually speak to the maps that are being proposed. The other thing is people are concerned about the democracy. People want to make sure that we're saving our democracy. They don't like the direction in which we are going, and there is a deep concern for people out there. And then lastly, people kept saying, that it's great that we're having these hearings. And again, these are hearings, but people want to make sure that their voice are listened to. And the way that we listen to people's voices is to take in consideration the comments that they've made, and that includes having an independent commission draw the maps. Thank you, Mr. Chairs.
Thank you, Representative Pryor. Are there further comments from the committee? Representative Arrington.
Thank you. I have been to 5 of the 9 hearings, and the message has been loud and clear. It's pretty much been the same one. So we have to be listening, and the proof of whether we're listening is what happens on that other track that Representative Pierce brought up, what's going on behind the scenes. That's what we need to, again, demand, that be transparent. So far, it's not looking too good, but hopefully it will get better. And I think it's up to the public to hold us accountable and say, as has been mentioned, our democracy depends on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further comments from the committee? I want to thank all of you for coming today. I want to thank those of you who spoke, especially the young people, for your articulateness. Thank you for those, for the understanding of those who had to abbreviate their comments at the end. Appreciate that. And just appreciate the overall respect for the process and discussion that we've had here today. With that, my co-chairman and I adjourn the meeting. Thank you.